بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. And we begin today's class by discussing some of the duties of Hajj. Now you remember that a lot of rituals such as salat, fasting, etc. Such rituals are considered to be forms of worship. Not all forms of worship constitute of pillars and mandatory acts and sunnah, but those rituals that are like salat, fasting, that are related to fiqh are usually made of these things. So scholars have gathered these rulings about them so that it would make it easy for the student of knowledge to learn and master how these things work. So when we talk about pillars of salat, once you know that this is a pillar, if you do not say Allahu Akbar in the first takbir for prayer, takbiratul ihram, the inaugurational takbir, this means that your prayer is invalid. In fasting, if you do not refrain from eating and drinking, etc., then a pillar of your fasting is gone, then your fasting is invalid. In Hajj, if you do not attend Arafat and you do not go to Arafat during the time and the day of Arafat and the night of Arafat, the night of Eid that is, that follows it, then your Hajj is invalid. So, al-wajibat. And to most of you, I believe that this can sound a bit ambiguous, and maybe you would process 70% of what you hear, especially for those who did not go for Hajj. Those who went for Hajj understand 100% what I'm talking about. But those who did not, maybe it would be difficult for them to imagine what I'm talking about, but hopefully after we finish this, inshallah, and we go into the description of Hajj, we will try our level best to connect the dots so that you would have a full picture of how Hajj is performed, inshallah azza wa jal. So what are the duties? Here we have 7 points listed. Number 1, entering into the state of consecration, and that is ihram, at the designated point, which is miqat, on one's route. Okay, what is this, Sheikh? Because this sounds a bit gibberish. Well, miqat is singular, mawaqit is plural, and the word miqat comes from or stemmed from. However, mawaqit is either time bound or location bound. So what do you mean by that? Hajj cannot be performed except on specific dates in the Hijri calendar. I cannot come today is possible because there are 3 months of Hajj: the month of Shawwal, the month of Dhul Qa'dah, and the month of Dhul Hijjah, the 10th, 11th, and the 12th month of the Hijri calendar. Now, having said that, The vast majority of acts happen in 3 to 4 days. And if you're following the Sunnah, happens in 5 days. And that is in the month of the Hijjah. But these are the mawaqit. These are the designated times of Hajj. There are location-bound mawaqit. And these make like a ring round the holy shrines of Mecca, Mina, and Arafat. So the Prophet ﷺ designated these places. And he said to us, Dhul Hulayfa, which is a location close to Medina, is the miqat for the people of Medina. Al-Juhfa is the miqat for the people coming from the Levant countries. And this is one of the signs and prophecies that our Prophet ﷺ is telling the truth, because at that moment the Levant countries did not know anything about Islam and were not Muslims. And likewise the Yemen, the Prophet says Yalamlam is for the people of Yemen. And he gave us these mawaqit, passes by these locations or but by what's adjacent to it, he must perform his ihram. He must enter into the state of consecration, where he takes off all of his clothes and wear the 2 garments of ihram, as we will come and discuss this inshallah in details. But my point here is to point out to you that there are 4 or 5 locations surrounding the shrine of Mecca. So whether you come from the east, south, north, or west, you have to approach that area and not pass it until you wear your ihram. You put on your ihram and you come into the state of ihram, or the state of consecration. So number 1, that is ihram. Okay, what happens if I were to pass that area without performing ihram? For example, I'm coming from India, and while I was on the plane, I fell asleep. So they announced that we are passing over the miqat zone. I was asleep, and the plane landed in Jeddah, and I just woke up. What to do? You have one of 2 choices. One is that you have to drive all the way back to the miqat, which is Taif, about an hour and a half from Jeddah, or 2 hours, and it's an hour from Mecca itself. The second choice is that you have to perform or enter the state of ihram, but pay the expiation. Number 1 of the duties that no one should ignore or take it lightly. Number 2, staying at Arafat until sunset. Now we know, and we will get to know this later on inshallah, while talking about the description of Hajj, that pilgrims go to Mina on the 8th day of Dhul Hijjah, and they pray there Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, and the Fajr of Arafat day. And in the morning they move from Mina to Arafat. They should stay in Arafat until the sun sets. So this is the second wajib or mandatory act, to stay there until the sun sets. If a person rushes, so instead of leaving at 6:30, he says, no, I want to move on. And he leaves at 5 o'clock. Well, the sun is still up. Is his Hajj valid? Yes, indeed, the Hajj is valid. But he's sinful for not waiting until the sun sets, and he has to give expiation of slaughtering a sheep in the haram area and distributing the meat to the poor there. Number 3, staying at Muzdalifah until the break of dawn. We stay in Arafat until the sun sets. When the sun sets, we do not pray Maghrib and Isha. We move directly from Arafat to Muzdalifah. And in Muzdalifah, so if a person goes to Muzdalifah and rushes to leave it before the break of dawn, without any legitimate reason, in this case, he had abandoned something that is mandatory, which is staying the night or spending the night in Muzdalifah. The expiation is the same as mentioned before. What do you mean by legitimate reason? Well, the Prophet ﷺ gave the permission for to leave Muzdalifah and head to Mina after the moon disappears, which is about 1:30 a.m., 1:30 or 2 a.m. So they would avoid the crowd. So this is permissible for them and for those who are accompanying them. Nowadays, people travel by buses. So if you are in a particular bus and you're a man and you're strong, but if you were left behind till the break of dawn and they leave a couple of hours before you, amidst all these crowds and camps and buses, you will definitely be lost. So most of the men are giving the concession to accompany their buses, husbands to accompany their wives, sons to accompany their mothers, etc., and go with them, though they are able to stay, but due to the fact that there is a very big possibility that he would be lost for a very long time. Therefore, he can go. Number 4, spending the next 2 or 3 nights at Mina. So today, after we prayed Fajr in Muzdalifah, we drove to Mina, and today is the day of Eid. What should we do? We should do the rituals to be performed in Eid, which is throwing the Jamaratul Aqaba, 7 stones. We throw at what is known as Jamaratul Aqaba. And then we slaughter our sacrifice, if we're sacrificing. And then shave our hair, shave our heads, or cut it short, depending. And then go and make Tawaf al-Ifada and Umrah and Sa'i al-Hajj, for those who do not make Sa'i al-Hajj. So now the days of Eid, rituals have been done. What should I do? Okay, you have to spend the night in Mina. Tonight, the day of Eid, and tomorrow night, the 11th. So that when you wake up on the 12th, you have the option whether to go and conclude your Hajj or to stay and spend the 12th night till the morning of the 13th, and by this the Hajj would be over for you and you have to conclude it. And we will come to speak about this. So it's an option whether to spend the 3rd night or not. But the mandatory thing is that you must spend 2 nights in Mina. This is mandatory. Otherwise, you have to pay expiation. You cannot leave And this is known as spending the night of the Eid, which is actually the night of the 11th and the night of the 12th. It's mandatory. The night of the 13th, this is optional for you to spend or not, but on the day of the 13th, you will right order. So we have what is known as stoning. And the stoning on the day of Eid is done only for one jamara, which is like a pool, and it's the largest of the three. On the second day, which is the 11th day of Dhul Hijjah, after the adhan of Dhuhr, I have to throw the small jamara, 7 pebbles, stones. Then the middle one with 7, then the big one or Jamarat al-Aqaba with 7. That's it. This is all what I do. Now the order is essential. It has to be the small, the medium, and the large. If I reverse it, this doesn't work. And it has to be with 7 pebbles, as the Prophet had done, alayhi salatu wassalam. If someone mixed them up, in this case he had abandoned something that is mandatory, and he has to pay for that. Number 6, shaving one's head for men. And the shaving is to exit the state of ihram. Remember, when I reached the miqat, I took off my clothes, had a ghusl, a bath, then wore my 2 garments. I entered the state of ihram. Now, in order to exit the state of ihram, I have to shave my head, but this shaving should be after I have stoned Jamarat al-Aqaba. Once I've stoned Jamarat al-Aqaba, I shave my head, and then I can take a bath, wear new clothes, put perfume, do everything that was restricted upon me when I assumed the state of ihram. Everything becomes halal except intimacy with the missus, because this requires that I make the second tahallul, and this can be delayed few days later on, but the sunnah is to do it on the day of Eid. Number 7, the tawaf or the farewell at the end, except for women who are in their period or having postnatal bleeding. So let us go from the beginning. 8th of the Hijjah, we went to Mina, spent the day there, praying Dhuhr 2 rak'ahs, Maghrib 3, Isha 2 rak'ahs, but do not combine. On the 9th morning after Fajr, we go to Arafat. This is the 9th. We spend the day there until the sun sets. We pray Dhuhr and Asr combined at the time of Dhuhr, 1 o'clock, 2 rak'ahs, salam, then Iqamah, 2 rak'ahs, salam, and we've done our Dhuhr and Asr. After sunset, we move to Muzdalifah. Once we reach there, 9 o'clock, 8, 10 o'clock p.m., we pray Maghrib and Isha combined with Isha prayed 2 rak'ahs. We spend the night there making dhikr, sleeping, resting, because tomorrow we have a lot of things to do. After Fajr Adhan, we pray Fajr, and we remain in Muzdalifah near the Mash'ar al-Haram, remembering Allah Azza wa Jal, making dhikr until it's light, but the sun has not risen yet. And we move to Mina. Once we reach Mina on the day of Eid, we throw the pebbles, 7 stones at Jamarat al-Aqaba, we slaughter a sacrifice, we shave our heads, and we offer tawaf and sa'i al-Hajj. By this, my Hajj is complete, pillar-wise. And then we wait until Dhuhr is called. After the adhan of Dhuhr is called, we go and throw the pebbles, small, then the medium, then Jamarat al-Aqaba. and then we retire to our tents and camps. We spend the day and the night there. The following day is the 12th, and we do the same after the adhan of dhuhr. After we finish throwing the pebbles, we have the option to leave to Mecca and conclude our Hajj, or to spend another day and do the same thing the following day, which is the 13th, and then conclude our Hajj by going to Mecca. Either one. So we went to Mecca. Now, the only remaining thing for us is that we gather our things and we're ready. Okay, we will depart at XYZ hour. Everybody knows this? Okay. Now it's time to make the farewell tawaf. So as we are about to leave, I have to go around the Kaaba 7 times in what is known as Tawaful Wada', the farewell tawaf. This is the last thing I do before leaving. So I don't do it and then go spend a couple of days in haram shopping and eating and resting in the hotel room. No. This is to be done before exiting and leaving Mecca for good. So I do this tawaf and I leave. I do it wearing normal clothes. After I do it, there is nothing to cut, shorten your hair or shave. This is called farewell tawaf and it's mandatory. But if a woman is in her menses, she can't offer it. Well, does this mean that she has to stay until she's pure? No. It does not mean that. She can Hajj with the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet performed his farewell tawaf, and he said to the companions, let's go. They told him that Safiya is in her menses. So he said to them, even though, let her leave, meaning that without performing tawaf al-wada', the farewell tawaf, because this is mandatory except for a woman who has this natural excuse. Otherwise, she would have caused of the Hajj expedition to delay their return to Medina, which is a lot of hardship upon them. So Allah Azza wa Jal exempted her from this mandatory tawaf. Now there are a number of recommended practices, meaning that it is sunnah, it is recommended, but if you don't do it, there is nothing haram on you. Number one, taking a bath and wearing perfume for men, and putting 2 white ihram garments. So bathing for the ihram is a highly recommended sunnah, but it's not mandatory. So if I just simply put on my ihram and go to Mecca, no problem. My ihram is valid, my umrah is valid, my hajj is valid. But the doing of the Prophet ﷺ, and to wear perfume before wearing the ihram, and this is to glorify the state of ihram and to give a high status to this ritual you're about to perform. Men are recommended to wear 2 white ihram garments. So a waist wrapper or an izar, something that covers. 2, it is recommended to clip one's nails, remove the pubic and armpit hair, and to trim one's mustache. And this is not backed up by any authentic hadith. So why are we mentioning it? We are mentioning it because you remember that the jurors, the scholars who write in fiqh, they are copying and imitating their scholars and the scholars above them and the scholars above them, and then until they reach Hanbal. But not necessarily all these views are based on Quran and Sunnah. Some of it is based on ijtihad. Some of it is based on istihsan. Some of it is based on pure logic. So if you ask yourself, removing the pubic and armpit hair. Is it part of the sunnah? Definitely. Clipping the nails. Is it part of the sunnah? Of course. Trimming the mustache as well. But these are things related to fitrah, as in the hadith, 10 characteristics of fitrah, hadith of Mother Aisha in Sahih Imam Muslim, and hadith of Anas. The Prophet has timed for us, alayhi salatu wasalam, 40 days, and not to exceed that, for clipping the nails, for removing the armpit and the pubic hair. These are all sunnahs. We have no dispute in that. The problem is this sunnah related to ihram or not? The answer is no. So why do jurors mention it? Jurors mention it because they believe that once you are in the state of ihram, you may require a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe more, where you would be which is right. So they say, in order to move forward and to reduce the harm as much as possible, this is recommended just before you enter the state of ihram. So yeah, it is recommended, but it is not from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that we should say and relate it to ihram. This is something that is logical by the scholars, but it is not part of the sunnah. Number 3, performing the tawaf of arrival for those doing the pilgrimage in the ifrad or qirar methods. This means that 2 out of 3 of the rituals of Hajj, Qiran and Ifrad, when you come to Mecca on the 8th or on the 7th of the Hijjah, it is highly recommended sunnah for you to perform Tawaf al-Qudum, which is a sunnah. It's not mandatory. And after it, you perform Sa'i al-Hajj, which is a pillar, which is usually done on the 10th day onwards, not before. But there is an exception because the Prophet was in the state of Qiran and he offered it on the 8th day of the Hijjah. Therefore, it is highly recommended sunnah to perform. But if you skip it, you said, nope, I'm not even interested in doing it. I'm going to do it on the 10th day of the Hajj, of the Hijjah with Tawaf al-Ifadah. Totally legit, and there's nothing wrong with that. Number 4, jogging in the first 3 rounds of Tawaf of arrival. This jogging is known as Raml. Raml. And it is to walk in short strides, steps, and in a fast fashion. The origin of it was that when the Prophet ﷺ came on Umratul Qada, they were blocked by the idol worshippers. And they reached a truce and they made what is known as Sulh al-Hudaybiyah. They wrote a treaty that the Muslims go back this year and come back next year. So the Prophet agreed to that. To make a long story short, they went back, and then the following year they came in Ihram for Umrah. So the people of Mecca, as agreed, left their homes and went to the mountain tops and the hilltops, observing them, looking at them. Now you know that it's about 550 kilometers either walking or on camel's back. So it's a long journey that probably takes like 3 to 5 days. So when the companions reached Mecca, they were tired and weary. So the idol worshippers started mocking and joking. Look at them. The fever of Medina has affected them negatively. Look how weak and lazy they are. So the Prophet told them, alayhi salatu wasalam, that Rahim Allahum ri'an arahum min nafsihi quwwa. May Allah have mercy upon every one of you, showing them strength. So they started in this march type, short strands, fast paced. So the idols worshippers were looking and they were shocked and said, these are the guys that you claim that the fever of Medina has affected them? Wallah, they are jumping like deers and gazelles. So it became a sunnah for the whole of the Muslims. The first three, if you are performing Tawaf al-Qudum as a Qarin or a Mufrid, you do it. Other types of Tawaf, no, you don't do that. So this is part of the Sunnah, the first rounds. Number 5, bearing one's right shoulder when doing the Tawaf of arrival. And this is for men only. So this same Tawaf, Tawaf al-Qudum, where you stride 3 rounds, the Sunnah is, if I'm covering my shoulders with this towel, big white towel, once I begin my Tawaf, I should bring the one that's covering my right shoulder, my left shoulder. So my right shoulder is not covered anymore. This is called in Arabic idtiba'. Idtiba'. And it has like 2 or 3 letters, extremely difficult for non-Arabs. The Dad and Ta and Ain. Al-idtiba'. And this is how we know that a person is a native or not, by telling him, what is it called? It's ittiba'. Ittiba'. Idtiba'. And it takes practice, a lot of practice. And this is the same with all Arabic letters. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. The Ain. So many people say إياك نعبد. نعبد. They cannot do it. So for non-Arabs, it is highly recommended to repeat it like 1,000 times. Ain. You keep on repeating it until you master it. Try not to let anybody listen to you while doing it, because they will think that you're crazy. But this is how you pronounce it. Ittiba'. So uncovering this is only in the first Tawaf, Tawaf al-Qudum. And after, but this is not 3 rounds, it's the whole 7. So whenever there is Raml, there is Ittiba'. The only difference is that Ramina, the night that precedes the day of Arafat, this day is known as the 8th day of Dhul Hijjah. This day is known as Yawmu at-Tarwiyah. And Tarwiyah is the day where people take their camels and water them so that the camels fill their stomachs with water, because during the next 3 or 4 days there won't be water for them to drink. So they call it Yawm al-Tarwiyah, the 8th day. It's a day of preparation. So it's a sunnah that you spend the 8th day in Mina. But it is normal if you go to Arafat directly from Jeddah or from wherever you're coming, not passing by Mina. There's nothing wrong in that. Number 7, repeating the phrase of Talbiyah from the time of entering into the state of consecration of Jamarat al-Aqaba on the day of Eid. So part of the sunnah is, if I reach the miqat, take a bath, wear my ihram garments, I start to say, لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك. And I keep on repeating it on the day of Tarwiyah, on the day of Arafat, and Jamarat al-Aqaba on the day of Eid. I cease and stop saying the Talbiyah. Khalas, it ends now. And I would never say it again for the rest of my journey. Number 8, offering the Maghrib and Isha prayers together in Muzdalifah. This is a sunnah. Likewise, offering Dhuhr and Asr, giving a sunnah and a concession from Allah Azza wa Jal. But your prayer is valid, does not impact your Hajj. Number 9, stopping close to Al-Mash'ar al-Haram at Muzdalifah from Fajr until shortly before sunrise, if possible. If not, then any place in Muzdalifah. And this is part of the Sunnah which the Prophet did, alayhi salatu wasalam, that after he prayed Fajr, he stayed near Al-Mash'ar al-Haram, which is in Muzdalifah, making dua until it was light. The sun did not rise, but it was light almost or about to rise, and he concluded with that his Hajj, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we will get to talk about this inshallah later on. We move on to the questions. Question number 1 from Haslin Fatima. If a person is greedy or has a fear that he won't pay zakat and does not buy gold because zakat is due on it, and he spends his money only on property, will it be sinful intention? The answer is yes. If your intention is to evade, to escape giving zakat, and this is why you buy real estates, property, cars, whatever, in this case, yes, you will be sinful for your intention. But if genuinely speaking, you want to buy property, not to avoid, because you want to buy a property or to buy a car, something that you may use, then there is nothing sinful in that. It all depends on your intention. Fatima says, should we say the morning and evening adhkar after praying Fajr and Maghrib, or can we say them once the times of Fajr and Maghrib have arrived? Yes, if it's not related to praying Fajr, it's related to the time when it is due. But most people observe their morning adhkar after praying Fajr, so that the adhkar of the prayer is combined with the adhkar of the morning. So instead of reciting Qul Huwallahu Ahad 3 times for adhkar of the morning and Qul Huwallahu Ahad once for adhkar as-salat, they recite it 3 times, intending that it is sufficient for both adhkar as-salat and adhkar of the morning. Fida says, will the righteous of a people be spared when Allah wishes to destroy their people, like Lut, or will they be destroyed also like the hadith of Zainab when evil is widespread? Fida is referring to hadith of Zainab, mother of the believers, where she said that once the Prophet ﷺ entered my chambers scared, and he said, وَيْلٌ لِلْعَرَبِ مِنْ شَرٍّ قَدْ اقْتَرَبَ. Woe to the Arabs from an evil that is approaching. The dam of Gog and Magog has been opened this big, meaning that it's about to expand and they're about to come out. So Mother Zainab said, O Prophet of Allah, is it possible that we can be doomed while there are lots of righteous people among us? And the Prophet said, yes, this is possible if the corruption is widely spread. So Fida is saying that if Allah's wrath were to descend upon us today, his family, except his wife, or like Prophet Nuh and those who embarked on the ark and the ship with him and were saved from the flood, etc. The answer is most likely no, because this was an exception for the messengers and those with them. Nowadays, if what is known as a natural disaster takes place, the good and the bad, and of course the ugly, would be included. And this was proven through a number of hadiths where the Prophet ﷺ told us that while there was an army attempting to invade the Kaaba, Allah made a landslide underneath them, and they were all doomed and swallowed by the earth. So one of the companions asked, "O Prophet of Allah, what about the women? What about the children? What about those who were forced to come out with them to work and not to fight?" And the Prophet said, "They will be resurrected on the day of judgment according to their intention." So those who were innocent, they will be resurrected innocent. They will not be charged for something they had not done. Like the tsunami that swept Asia 10, 15 years ago, maybe more. They were innocent people. But because it was the wrath of Allah Azza wa Jal, those who deserved it will go directly to hell, and those who didn't will not be punished for that, and they will go to paradise. What is the ruling when people praying Jumu'ah in their home with their family? Is it valid? Nowadays, because of the COVID-19 and intimidation that health authorities are given, people are ordered by the authorities to pray home and to avoid any congregation. And this is what we've been doing here in Saudi Arabia. Tomorrow is the second Friday that we do not pray in the masjids due to the curfew. So is it possible for me to gather my family members and pray Jumu'ah? The answer is no. Jumu'ah has to be prayed in congregation, in Jama'ah. And we are in a Muslim country, and there are masjids all over the place. But the curfew was done for our safety, so we hope. And it is not permissible to conduct Friday prayers without the authorized ruler, because he delegates those who are entitled or allowed to deliver such a Friday sermon, and they deputize him. But not everyone's entitled to just call the Friday khutbah in his home and lead his family. This is not congregation, this is not jama'ah, and that is not permissible. Tairu Imuni, I think, is it permissible to take a pregnant woman to a sheikh to write dua for her in order for the baby to be brilliant? Such practice means that people believe in this sheikh, and they believe that he has an unborn child, and probably they think that he can deprive such a child from a gift or more. And this is shirk. To believe in such soothsayers, fortune tellers, imposters, all of these people, it is totally prohibited to go to, let alone believe in. No sheikh would do such a thing for you, a real sheikh. And if I were to do such things, I would have been a multi-billionaire by now. But this has nothing related to Islam. Having this conviction that this sheikh or this maulana has the ability to make dua or to write something that would make my child a second Einstein, this is blasphemous and shirk. Only Allah can do this. Supplicate to Allah Azza wa Jal. Ask Allah for a healthy child rather than going to such imposters and jeopardizing your own deen, your own Islam. Manding Drama says, my question is about menstruation. What should a woman do when her menstrual cycle stops on the fourth day of her cycle? Usually it is 7 days, but it stopped on the fourth day at Fajr time, and she continues not to pray until the next day, which is a Friday, at Dhuhr time. As she sees a small amount of white discharge that indicates purity, so she decides to pray the salat she missed from the previous day. However, as the blood returned, and this was a large amount of blood at Maghrib time, this situation, also what advice can you give to a woman going through this? Jazakallahu khairan. First of all, the issue of women's monthly cycle is usually complicated, and women differ, and their menses also differs. But generally speaking, if you know that your menses is fixed to 7 days, it never changed, always the full 7 days, with few interruptions in between, but 7 is 7. In this case, you should not have performed salat until you see your purity. So the interruption of the blood may be, and I highly believe that when it stopped for a day or so, you still had some brownish or yellowish discharge. I don't think it stopped totally, completely, and you saw your sign of purity. Rather, it was mixed. But let's assume two scenarios. Scenario one, your menses is 7 days, it stopped on the fourth, and for a whole day, 24 hours, you see nothing. Total purity. No color discharge, nothing. And on the fifth day, the end of it, you saw your white thread-like discharge. What to do? You have to perform ghusl, and you have to pray. But you do not pray the days that were missed because you're still waiting for the white thread-like discharge. Once you get the menses in the flow of blood, again, you stop, and you consider it to be menses. So this is what you're supposed to do. And what you have done is, inshallah, correct. You thought that you were clean. And Hashim says, please can you tell me if I can pray the 2 rak'ah Tahiyyatul Masjid as I'm praying at home because the authority said so? Hashim, how can it be that you want to pray the salutation of the masjid when you're praying at home? This doesn't make any sense. Tahiyyatul Masjid was mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he said, when any one of you enters a masjid, he must not sit down until he prays 2 rak'ahs. So yes, if you enter a masjid, pray these 2 rak'ahs. But if you're home, then definitely the answer is no, you do not pray these 2 rak'ahs because you did not enter a masjid. Habiba says, is it permissible for a woman to wear colored shoes providing it does not make a sound? It's not only the sound that counts, it's how it looks. So if you wear eye-catching shoes that people would be attracted to, in this case this is not adequate, and it defies the purpose of hijab. It should be normal color. So yes, if it's dark blue, if it's black, if it's something that is accepted, but if it's flashy pink or red, then this is inappropriate. Is it haram? I wouldn't say it's haram, but I wouldn't allow any of my daughters or my wife to wear this. It would make me look silly. What are you doing? You're telling people, look at me? Uh, Tasneem says, during this difficult time when kids have no school and staying home, they're more and more as parents to keep them occupied. Please share with us du'as for the betterment. Well, the du'as is general. The sky is the limit. You can ask Allah Azza wa Jal for everything you want. As for the social media, this is addiction, and this is poisonous to let the children freely use the internet like that. I always advise people when have their children abide by their rules, especially when it comes to mobile phones or PDA, iPad, or notes or whatever. I always tell them, eliminate these things from home. Take their smartphones. Do not give them any smartphone. And buy a wide, big screen with a PC. Not even a laptop, a PC. So they can do their homeworks and their browsing and whatever they want to do from halal activities on this computer with this big screen that everyone in the room can see. But when your children put on their headphones, and they are giving their back to the wall and facing you and doing this, and you don't know what they're doing, they're listening to Abdul Basit Abdul Samad in the Quran. Definitely not. And this is extremely dangerous. Having them 24/7 sitting home doing nothing, all what they will do is watch YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, all these filthy influencers who say bad things, and definitely something you have to be careful for. Juvairia says, can a woman read Ayatul Quran al-Karima or Ayatul Kursi during her menses? The answer is yes. She can read the whole Quran while she's on her period. The restriction is not on reciting it. The restriction is on touching the Quran itself. So if she's wearing gloves or she's using her mobile phone or computer to read the Quran, she can read the whole Quran without a problem. Naim says, does 4 rak'ah of Al-Asr Sunnah exist? Of course it does. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, Rahimahullahu mra'an salla qabla al-asri arba'an. May Allah have mercy on a man or a person who prays before Asr 4 rak'ah. And this is a disputed hadith, whether it's authentic or not, but Shaykh al-Albani classified it as Hasan and others classified it as Sahih. So inshallah, it is advisable to offer it. Basira says, I am 45-year-old woman and I don't have a mahram. Can I go for Hajj? The answer to this question was provided to us by the Prophet ﷺ when he said, it is not permissible for a woman who believes in Allah on the Day of Judgment to travel without a mahram. And this definitely includes Hajj. Therefore, you are not allowed to go without a mahram. Even if you die without performing Hajj or Umrah, Allah will not hold you accountable. On the contrary, Allah will reward you for not disobeying Him and traveling without a mahram, and He will reward you as if you have performed your Hajj. This is all the time we have. Until we meet Monday, inshallah, I leave you fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.